So I'm Charlie. I'm the CEO of Advent Tech. Our motto is we educate, we sell tech, and we just really want to help folks understand things that are sometimes complicated, but don't have to be, like Microsoft licensing, for instance. And Alex, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yes. Hello, everyone. I'm Alex Fitzhugh, and I am a business development manager over Microsoft Education. Nice to be glad to be here, and I look forward to speaking with you guys.
Awesome. And then Jason, how about you?
Yeah, thanks a lot, Charlie. Thanks for having us. Welcome, everyone, and thanks for joining. Jason Weinkoff. Been involved in Microsoft specific licensing, software licensing for the better part of 8 years now, focusing on just about every vertical there is, but certainly in the education space. And love getting the opportunity to join Advent and talk to customers and see how we can help.
Okay, let's jump right into explaining Microsoft licensing in a nutshell. First, there is four major buckets, and this is oversimplifying a little bit, but once you get this, you'll really understand how this begins to look. First is user licensing. So I start with user licensing because it's kind of the anchor point for a lot of the other pieces. And actually, there's a lot of user licensing you buy now that encapsulate other licenses. So these days we call this the Entra ID, right? And you're used to using terms like Azure or Active Directory, depending on how you're managing the licenses, right? But your Entra ID is your identifier within the Microsoft ecosystem. We use this to authenticate. We use this to tie permissions, like what are your email permissions and access permissions, and then of course file storage as well. So your user license, we call that your Entra ID. That's the current language for it. And I do just want folks to know that this is sort of the anchor point for a lot of licensing these days is really based on user licensing. And so let's jump over because a lot of times people start the conversation about licensing with Office, right? People will call us and say, we want 365 licenses or we want Microsoft licenses. And what they usually mean is they want Office licensing. And so I do want to kind of mention this. I already said we see a lot of licensing based on user licensing. And one of the things that we did tell folks when we were marketing for this webinar is there's like a dozen ways to buy Microsoft Office licenses, right? So even just within the device ecosystem, you can buy it perpetual or annual. That's really kind of a device licensing model, right? Most user licensing really is annual, of course. And you can still get Microsoft Office for free if you're a school. I want to make sure you hear that from me. And this is what's typically called an O365 A1. And so this is still available for schools, but again, it's online only. And it's actually a user license, by the way. You'll notice that whenever you see 365, they were typically talking about user licensing. And then there's other options like standard versus pro. There's the bigger Office packages. And again, I'm not trying to confuse you as much as just help you to understand most Office licensing is bought on a user basis, but there are these other options. And there are even still the user free Office licenses available to schools or districts, but it's online apps only, which not everybody prefers, right? We like the desktop app option. And then there's different ways to pay for these licenses. And then I'll go over this in just a second. There's great ways to bundle these licenses under a big user licenses, and that's why we usually sell them that way. But a lot of times when people say I want 365 or they're talking about Office licensing. This is actually Alex's area of specialties, right? Is operating systems and Windows devices, right? So when you're thinking of getting your Windows devices, whether it's a Surface, laptop, desktop, whatever it is, you got to think about the operating system on the device, right? And so Windows 10 is going end of life. Alex, I think you and I were just talking about that the other day. It's going to happen kind of late 2025, but it is going to happen. So can your devices upgrade? If you don't know how to check that, let us tell you how to check that within the system. It's not hard to do. And then we can talk to you about how to get Windows 11 devices. And I'll come back to this in just a second. The last bucket, and I know I'm just flying through this, but I do want you to kind of get a picture of the buckets, is really security and management, right? And so the two main products we often talk about for schools when we talk about security management would be Endpoint Defender, And there's variations of Endpoint Defender. There's levels of it, right? Depending on how secure you need those endpoints to be. And then there's Intune, which is Microsoft's mobile device management tool, right? But think about that as they both belong within the security and management category, right, for Microsoft licensing. So now all of a sudden you understand the four major buckets of Microsoft licensing. You can begin to even understand more complicated topics like, let's say, Autopilot, right? You've heard of Autopilot before, and you're like, what does Autopilot do? Autopilot is a management tool that you use to manage your operating system images, right? With your apps and your settings and your unique image you want to go. So Autopilot kind of lives in both of these buckets, right? Which is kind of fun. And so Autopilot is a security license, but it is used to manage your endpoint devices, right? And what's the image on the endpoint device? Let's even go as far as talking about Copilot AI, right? What is Copilot AI? That is obviously Microsoft's AI tool. Now, if you have a Microsoft license, you can already use Copilot within the Edge browser, right? And this is how most AI or the language learning models function is they function by combing the web for information. And if you have any kind of Microsoft licensing active, just about any within the district currently, your teachers or your administrators or staff and maybe even students can go to the Edge browser, top right-hand corner, and activate Copilot and use it on the web. But if you buy Copilot for your staff or for your teachers, it is a user license that is used within the user ecosystem, right? You pay for it per user. Now you can search your own file storage. You can search your own emails for information or trends or, which of my quizzes or questions do the students never seem to get right? You can look through your own information, and then you also use Copilot within Office, right? So you use Copilot within Word, within PowerPoint, within the various Office apps to enhance your lesson plan building, things like that. So even something like Copilot is a lot easier to understand when you understand the four buckets of Microsoft licensing, because again, it is a user license. You use it within your user ecosystem, and then you use it within the Office apps ecosystem as well. Okay, guys, one last thing, and then I'm going to let Alex really take over, and she's going to take you through some very cool stuff here in terms of some of the specific Microsoft licensing programs. So we often talk about O365 or M365 licenses. Now, the reason why, if you come to us and ask us for Microsoft licensing, well, we will often direct you to one of these two SKUs. And there is also A5. We already talked about the A1, the O365 A1. That's the freebie online apps only, a little limited. But the O365 A3, well, that covers your user licensing and your Office licensing, right? So why do we oftentimes direct people towards an O365 if they have really limited Microsoft usage, but they still need all the user licensing tools and all the Office tools? That's an O365 A3. But if you're, really significantly have a large Microsoft deployment within the school or district, we'll often push you towards the M365 because it not only gets you everything we described here, but it also gets you all of these tools down here, right? So an M365 A3, a lot of times when you come to us and you say, I want some Microsoft licensing, we'll start with one of these two because it gets you all of the above the line and below the line tools that are described here. It also gets you Endpoint Defender and Intune, and it also gets you the ability to upgrade or downgrade your Microsoft licenses. So forgive my line pattern's a little messy here, right? But this is why we often recommend the M365 A3 is because it's kind of the all-in-one solution. It gives you all four of these buckets within your educational entity, and it's pretty reasonably priced. If you tried to buy all of these things individually, a la carte, you'd spend way more money than getting it all together, right? And this is what we mean when we say there's so many different ways to buy Microsoft Office. You can just buy it outright per user, per device, perpetual, annual, whatever else, or you can buy it within the bundled SKU ecosystem here, right? So I know that probably felt like drinking from a fire hose. And I'm going to turn it over to Alex now, who's going to really take you through some education specific programs and initiatives. But I'm going to put this back up as just kind of as a lesson and as a way for folks to understand, like, once you grasp the four major buckets of Microsoft licensing, it makes these conversations so much easier with your providers or folks like us, even when you want to go buy licensing. So from there, Alex, I'm going to turn it over to you. I'm going to go on mute and let you talk us through the specific Microsoft programs for education.
Thank you, Charlie. I think that was a great introduction, and you hit on a lot of stuff. I'll go a little deeper into my presentation. Hello, everyone. Again, so I'm over specifically Microsoft Education, and kind of my focus for today is to kind of highlight all of the investments of what Microsoft has done specifically within education, everything that is available for you from device to the cloud, and kind of simplify, I think, in terms of some of our solutions that I feel like get a little bit convoluted when you're having those conversations with your partner. So I do always like to start the conversation around Shape the Future. If you've never heard of it, this is a program specifically for education, and basically it just allows you to purchase Windows 11 Pro devices at a major discount. So normally, these devices would run you between, 6 to 800. But with the Shape the Future program, those devices, some of them can come below $500. And these are all OEM agnostic. So whether you prefer to partner with Lenovo, Dell, Acer, whoever your preferred OEM is, they will have a standard Shape the Future device. And it just kind of gives you more flexibility in getting Windows devices into your students' fingers, because all of these devices are going to be developed for their use. They're going to be a little bit more rugged and have the full power of Windows 11 Pro backing it. So I just want to reiterate that there's no kind of like difference from the operating standpoint. It's still going to be running a complete Windows 11 Pro. It's just that we've kind of brought down the cost of the device itself by working with each of the OEMs within this program. So again, these are just some of the standard devices that you can get across the board. I just wanted to show them to you. But you don't have to get these particular models. These are just the ones that are going to automatically come with Shape the Future on them. We have had instances in the past where, depending on your particular scenario, you might want a certain set of specs depending on what you're looking for, and that is something that Microsoft can work with. They can work with your preferred OEM to get a custom SKU and try to get Shape of Future pricing to bring down the cost if you wanted to get like a higher spec device. Because typically within Shape the Future, these devices are really geared towards students. So they're going to be, your normal like 464, 8128 range. But if you're looking for something a little bit outside of that, I mean, there have been instances where we've been able to go up a little bit in RAM or whatnot. It just depends on the opportunity. So I won't stay on this a whole lot because I know Charlie talked about autopilot, but since I started with devices, I do want to mention that with autopilot, that's what enables that zero touch deployment, making it easier for you to get your devices into your students' hands. And that's something that Advent can do on your behalf, is putting all of the user settings, everything that you would need for your particular school on that device, so that when it gets shipped to your doorstep, it's ready to go and you can immediately send them out to the assigned student or whoever it is. And now I kind of want to transition into some of the different investments from an AI standpoint available within education, because there is a lot. So I'm going to kind of give an overview of the different investments that Microsoft has made to embed AI within their solution. So there are a lot of opportunities for AI within education, and we kind of want to move away from um, the stereotype that it's only for use for students to cheat, and kind of help with how can we help the students use AI responsibly? What can we do to invest in responsible use? Because it's not going anywhere. It's becoming more prevalent, and when they leave school, they're going to be using it in their work. We're going to be using it in college. So, I feel it's part of our job to kind of help them navigate that landscape versus just ignoring it. And what I'll kind of go over today is how it's already embedded within Windows and also the Microsoft 365 platform. And then, of course, talk about some of the implications of like utilizing Copilot specifically within education. So I know there's been a lot of chatter around Copilot, and Copilot can be used within education, but we really see it being utilized, I would say, a bit more in higher education versus K through 12 because it is not available for children under the age of 18. But there are definitely some use cases of how it can be used in K through 12 if we're talking from like an administrator or a teacher standpoint, and I'll get into that in a bit. But you have Copilot within Windows, and then you have kind of, Copilot within the browser, and I'll get into that a little bit more too, the different versions of Copilot. But there are different ways that it can be used responsibly within education. And then, of course, as I've mentioned before, there are also other AI investments within the solution itself, and those are what I'm referring to when I talk about the learning accelerators. And if that's not something that you've heard before, or you're not as familiar with, I definitely want to go a little bit more in depth on those because there's a lot of cool things specifically within the learning accelerators. Okay, I love to show this slide to anyone when we're talking about Copilot because I feel like when I talk to some schools and I talk to a lot of people, there's a lot of confusion about, there's Copilot thing, there's Copilot in Windows. Like, what does all this mean, and what do I get within Windows, and what do I get if I pay for it? So I think this is a great way to break down what you're getting already within your ecosystem. So if you have Windows 11 in some capacity in your environment today, you are going to be able to get these first three versions of Copilot, which would be, Copilot in Bing, or formerly Bing Chat Enterprise. You're going to have Copilot in Edge. So pull up your browser and use Copilot. That way you'll have that. And then you'll have Copilot within Windows. Where you would see a paid version of Copilot is if you purchase Copilot within a Microsoft 365 subscription. And the only difference between that the M365 Copilot and Copilot Pro is that Copilot Pro is just for consumer use if you were using it, at home. But for M365 would be what you would use for your school or your school district. So this is just one example that I want to show of how Copilot can be used specifically like within Word. So as you see here, it's really all about prompting. And for this particular use case, a teacher put in, a prompt like, give me ideas of how I can teach linear equations using Minecraft education. And I think that this is, a really strong use case personally, because I feel like there's a lot going on here. So for starters, it's helping them create, a lesson plan rather quickly, which means less time on them to change out lessons within the classroom. But also why I really like it is they're utilizing two elements here. Instead of just, like your traditional teaching method where you might assign, like word problems or math problems, it allows for more creativity because now they're embedding the lesson within Minecraft, which leads, the game-based learning. And I think that this is really important because it captures more of a student's attention. I mean, math is my favorite subject, but if you ask me if, do I need to do 10 different, world problems through calculus, or can I go and play, a video game to learn math? I'm going to choose a video game. So I think that having this within your environment is really, really strong when we talk about how to engage every child and, incorporate their different learning styles and not, kind of leaving anyone behind. Okay, so that kind of ties into the learning accelerators. I'm not going to go over every single one of these for the sake of time, but I do want to highlight the foundational skills and then lead into the insights over here at the end. So when we look at, for instance, the first reading progress and reading coach, which again, I'm not sure if you are familiar with them, but this is also, I think, one of the most recognized learning accelerators when we talk about AI investments in education. And if you're not familiar, so reading progress and coupled with reading coach is essentially built into teams. So if a teacher assigns like a reading passage for their students, it has the ability to record the student reading the passage live, and it'll highlight, if they mess up a word, if they omit a word. It can even recognize if they mispronounce a word, or it can even recognize if, for instance, English isn't their first language, and maybe there's an accent there, but they're not necessarily mispronouncing a word. It's just picking up the accent. So it can recognize all of that, and it basically color codes any differences in like the intonation, the pronunciation. And so when the teacher goes to look at that reading assignment, they can see like, okay, the student missed X number of words, or they mispronounced this many words, and they get kind of like a grade from that assessment, and then they can quickly see like, are they struggling with this reading level? Do they need to do a lower reading level, or are they not struggling? Are they doing too easy with this type of reading passage? Do we need to assign them something harder? And it's really impactful because it allows for kind of each student to get kind of an individualized approach when we talk about developing their reading level. And then based on how they score, it can intuitively help to increase or decrease the difficulty of the reading passage. And it's also very similar with Math Progress and Math Coach, where again, if they're assigning math equations and problems based on like which questions they're getting right and which they're getting wrong, it can adjust the difficulty of that assignment. So if a student's consistently getting like perfect scores or near perfect scores, it'll start automatically assigning them harder equations to adjust to the level that they would need so that they stay interested. And again, I think that is really huge because um, what we kind of know is that if a student isn't getting challenged enough, they're also going to suffer from getting bored in the classroom. They're not going to feel like why do I need to be here? So having the ability to kind of individualize the learning within the classroom so that you can adjust to each of the students is really, really huge. And that leads me to the final foundational skill, which is reflect. So if you don't take away anything today, I definitely want you to take away Microsoft Reflect, because that is also something that I really, really loved the first time I saw. So basically within Reflect, within Teams, every day that, the child comes into school and they're in their classroom, they can check in and they can say how they feel. And they can utilize like the feelings monster. So if they feel angry, or if they're feeling depressed, or if they're feeling happy, if they're feeling excited, they can put how they're feeling. And it gives them like an emoji within Teams. So when a teacher's looking at their classroom, they can see like how are their students doing from an emotional standpoint. And it also has the ability to track how they've been doing on a historical scale. So for instance, if Johnny over here has said I'm depressed, and this is like the third time this month, then they're gonna be like, okay, I need to get in front of Johnny and figure out what's going on. Is something changed? Is he getting bullied at school? Is something is he struggling with something that I've been assigning, or did something change in his home life? I don't know, but teachers are better able to address those concerns by being able to use the reflect and note and get kind of a pulse on how their students are doing. So again, you're having less of getting in front of your students. And then you can also, on the flip side, if you have students that consistently check in and they're happy, they're excited, then like, okay, these are my rock stars. These are the ones I don't have problems with. And I don't need to give them as much support as maybe some of these other children that I need to get in front of. So it just helps teachers to better balance their time and their efforts within the classroom.
That's awesome, Alex. Just to throw out there again, because we live in this world of educational software and solutions. I mean, there's whole companies built around this idea of a daily wellness check. Panorama Education, I think, Hope Rising, maybe a few others that we run into out there. Even Securely, which is kind of a device management software, recently acquired a company that did daily wellness checks. So again, it's just so cool Microsoft has sort of acknowledged that that's part of the learning experience and built that into M365 as a way to check on the kids, and then even to kind of track that over time. So yeah, again, really cool stuff you guys are doing.
Thank you. And then, okay, the final one is insights, which I will lead into that. So with insights, all of this data that I've been talking about from the learning accelerators, reading progress, reading coach, to make it really easy to utilize all that efficiently, they have insights. And basically what it does, it creates a dashboard to track all of this information really easily. so that teachers and counselors, admins, the principal, they can all see on a holistic level, okay, this is how all the students are faring. And they can see like all the data that they're getting. It feeds it in a singular dashboard. And they can check, their social engagement, or, how they're doing from an academic standpoint. And it just helps them monitor progress for all the different students so that they can quickly assess, okay, which child is falling behind, which child is experiencing, social challenges, or, these are the children that are doing really well. And we want to, we're going to continue to keep saying, good things from these children. And that all is powered through insights, again, within teams. So I know that the learning accelerators is a lot, especially if you've not heard of it before. So I do want to highlight that there are some resources specifically with utilizing insights from an IT admin standpoint on how to properly enable these accelerators within your M365 environment. And then from a educator standpoint, there's also a few different resources that you can utilize, like how you can use it effectively within the classroom, what you want to use, what you don't want to use, etc. And all of these are clickable. And I'm sure that, Charlie's going to share this out with you after the training today. So you'll be able to, take a look at this at your leisure. And then, okay. So all the reason I want to show this is that kind of everything I've been talking about today ties into that Microsoft 365 platform. And I know that this is a very busy kind of picture, but it does kind of represent everything that you would get within the M365 solution. And I think that that's important to highlight to Charlie's earlier point that it's more than just Office. It's so much more than that. And that's what you kind of see with this infographic. So when we talk about Microsoft 365, there's only 3 SKUs specifically for education, and that's the A1, A3, and A5 SKUs. And essentially what you're getting with all of those SKUs, regardless, is the entire Office suite. You get Minecraft for education, which again, that's huge, especially when you talk about what you're trying to do from a game-based learning standpoint, what you're trying to do from an esports standpoint. And then as we look at the A3 and the A5 licensing, that's where you can really start to make more informed decisions, because you're going to get, Intune for education to manage those devices, Microsoft Entra ID, and you're going to get more kind of security features to help with all of your endpoints within your environment. So this is kind of the complete solution. And regardless of the SKU, I did want to point out that all of those learning accelerators are still within even the A1 SKU, but they're all going to be built automatically within the Office platform. So that's across Teams, Word, PowerPoint, you name it. And again, we do have a lot of resources around that, because I know it can get a little confusing. It's a little difficult. So there's a lot of resources for Copilot specifically, and then also for M365. And there's also some resources based on like who's accessing it. So there's some from an IT admin's perspective, and there's also resources specifically for teachers, students, and even resources for parents. If parents want to get more, involved in like how their child themselves is using AI, whether it's at school, at home, etc. All of that is available for free through Microsoft. And again, these are all clickable, so you can access these at your leisure. And then I did want to call out 2 new studies. So these came out in the last few months, and these were done in partnership with Forrester. So it was a total economic impact study that was done, one with specifically with Windows devices in K through 12, and the impact that the school district had with deploying Windows devices within their environment and what they saw from that. And then there's another study specifically on the impact from a security standpoint of implementing Microsoft 365 A5. And I think that, as you start to think about, if you haven't started your refresh journey, which platform you're going to go with and which licensing you want to go, I think these will really help in kind of seeing like how others have implemented the solution, what they've seen that works. And definitely want to check these out. But that is all for me today.
Yeah, that's awesome.